Good morning, Indy fans. It's the 1st of March and it's time for DaviePHD's Mythbusters episode 27. Many things are said about various issues surrounding Scotland, our relationship with the rest of the UK, the European Union, independence, etc. So in these videos I try to bust the myths that many people believe. This week's myth is the one that everything would have been a shitload worse if Jeremy Corbyn was our Prime Minister. Now, I have to say before going any further, yes, this is an independence blog. Yes, I'm an SNP member and activist. Yes, I'm an Indy voter. But our leader will never be the UK Prime Minister. And I have to confess a sneaking admiration, balanced by just as many criticisms, for the last Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. You all know that I don't rate the UK government's coronavirus response at all. The only thing that has gone well is the vaccine rollout. The rest of it has been a clusterfuck. But it doesn't matter how well or how badly a government performs, they'll always have supporters. And one of the deflection tactics I've often heard when people level criticism at the Boris Johnson government is, can you imagine how bad this would have been with Jeremy Corbyn in number 10? Now, as Jeremy Corbyn didn't make it into number 10, we'll never 100% know what a Corbyn-led COVID-19 response would have looked like. But with 120,000 Britons dead, I decided to investigate if Jezza could really have done any worse. So in doing that, I've put together an imaginary timeline of Jezza in number 10, from his election victory through the pandemic. I've used real dates from significant pandemic events, but interpolated the effect of a more Corbyn-like approach. Let's imagine that parallel world with Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. In chronological order, 13th December 2019. Jezza wins general election 2019, or rather almost wins. The only way into number 10 is a coalition with the Scottish National Party and Lib Dems. So a weekend of negotiations starts. Boris starts packing. Monday the 16th of December 2019, Coalition Government Unity Cabinet announced, with Ian Blackford as Deputy Prime Minister, John McDonnell as Chancellor, Sir Keir Starmer as Brexit Minister, Sir Ed Davey as Foreign Secretary, and Dr Philippa Whitford as Health Secretary. 20th of December 2019, as Parliament breaks up for Christmas and taking advantage of record low borrowing rates, Jeremy Corbyn announces record investments in the National Health Service, broadband internet and other public services as per Labour manifesto promises. Corbyn also announces that Brexit will be delayed until a people's vote can be held in March 2020. That was a condition of SNP and Lib Dem support for his government. The 31st of December 2019, China alerts the World Health Organization of the emergence of COVID-19. 24th of January 2020, with the virus heading towards the UK, the government has a COBRA meeting chaired by Jeremy Corbyn. 30th of January, the World Health Organization declares a public health emergency of international concern. And on the 31st of January 2020, the day the UK was supposed to leave the European Union, 2 people test positive for COVID-19. As the nation was still in the European Union, we were able to partake of the EU purchasing schemes for PPE and medical equipment. Prime Minister Corbyn and his cabinet start to dissect the 2016 exercise Cygnus report to formulate a strategy. 12th of February 2020, a respected university study warns that the virus could affect 45 million people in the UK if it's left unchallenged. Jeremy Corbyn chairs a COBRA meeting along with the devolved administrations. Temperature checks and health questionnaires are introduced at UK air and sea ports and the Channel Tunnel. Quarantine is put in place for people entering the UK from China. 15th of February 2020, the first COVID-19 death in Europe. Jeremy Corbyn delays the EU People's Vote set for March. 18th of February 2020, Jeremy Corbyn chairs another COBRA meeting. Spain and Italy are added to the UK quarantine list. 26th of February 2020, a worst case scenario document shows that 500,000 Britons could die if the virus is left unchecked. Travel from China, Italy and Spain is banned. Only UK citizens in those countries are allowed to return from from them, but they must quarantine on arrival. 28th of February 2020, the first UK COVID death. 29th of February 2020, PPE and equipment begins to arrive from the European Union. 3rd of March 2020, UK government advised 2 metre social distancing, use of face coverings and begin community testing for COVID-19. 6th of March 2020, Greece, Iran and Italy close schools. The UK immediately follows suit. Despite the temperature checks and quarantine, infection rates continue to rise. The UK government closes the borders to all travellers. Foreign travellers can return home and UK citizens are allowed to return to the UK, but they must quarantine on arrival. Large events are cancelled. The Cheltenham Festival, Six Nations Rugby, Champions League football are all paused. 11th of March 2020, World Health Organization declares a global pandemic. Jeremy Corbyn orders a national lockdown and announces a furlough scheme to protect jobs and businesses. 13th of March 2020, Jeremy Corbyn, Prime Minister, appoints Professor DaviePHD's, a public health specialist, to set up a UK-wide test, trace and vaccinate operation. Knowing that local authorities already have public health teams in place, Professor Sridhar augments these teams with extra resources and funding. UK government makes funding available for vaccine research. 27th of March 2020, PPE stocks are starting to get low. Government releases 3D printer plans for vital items and makes free materials available to 3D printer owners. A massive community effort ensures that care homes and hospitals are supplied with homemade PPE. UK government immediately bans exports of UK-made PPE for COVID-19 response. 22nd of April 2020, the UK buys the Apple-Google COVID-19 app. Uptake is high and later pushes contact tracing success up to 99%. 25th of April 2020, the UK death toll is 1,000, but crucially plateauing out. There are 12,000 cases with 3,000 in hospital. July 11th 2020, with cases falling, borders closed and contact tracing going very well, COVID restrictions are eased slowly. The race to produce a vaccine is on. August 3rd 2020, Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn works with councils and teachers' unions to get schools back in September. September 14th 2020, deaths and infections continue to fall. Life almost returns to normal for British citizens. September 28th 2020, the UK opens its borders to non-leisure international travellers from countries with low R numbers, but still insists on pre-departure testing and hotel quarantine on arrival for 10 days. December the 1st, 2020, the UK government rolls out the coronavirus vaccine. The logistic operations of the military and Royal Mail are co-opted to assist in this undertaking. December 25th, 2020, having almost eradicated the virus, the UK public enjoyed Christmas with their families. February 28th, 2021, Her Majesty the Queen and Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn lead the nation in a national day of mourning on the anniversary of the first UK COVID death. With 50% of the UK adult population vaccinated, life is almost back to normal. In the end, the UK lost just over 5,000 people to the COVID-19 pandemic. March 18, 2021. The people's vote is today. A year later than first planned, having been of such great assistance to the UK during the pandemic, attitudes to the European Union have changed radically. Even former Prime Minister Boris Johnson acknowledges that pursuing Brexit was his worst mistake and vows to vote Remain in the people's vote. Now, you may accuse me of anti-Boris bias, but you'd be slightly wrong about that, and here's why. This timeline is fiction, but I have used real key dates from the UK response to the pandemic. A similar timeline that was applied to a fictional good response led by Boris, which I have previously highlighted, and I used the General Election 2019 Labour Manifesto to predict Jezza government policy direction. So it's as close to factual as I can make it. Now, people may have had very legitimate concerns about Jeremy Corbyn's ability to lead the country, but personally I can't think of anyone less suited to that task than Boris Johnson. But getting back to Jezza and Labour, the concerns are lessened because they wouldn't have been governing alone. The electoral maths wasn't behind an outright Labour victory, so Jezza would have been propped up by the SNP and the Lib Dems, and both of those parties have much more recent experience at governing than Labour does. We've often been told a four-nation approach would have been preferable, but with Labour and SNP in coalition at Westminster, consensus with Wales and Scotland could have been much easier to achieve, and home nation differences in approach would have been minimised, though admittedly the DUP and Jeremy Corbyn would have struggled to be chums. I also believe that there would have been less crony outsourcing under a Corbyn government, and I believe that they would have tried to keep things in-house as much as possible, augmenting and using the NHS and local authorities. With a crisis this big, I don't think outsourcing could be avoided by any government, but I don't believe that they would have been the first port of call like they were with Boris in charge. I also don't believe that under Jeremy's leadership that the crisis would have got so big. For all his faults, Jeremy Corbyn is a compassionate leader and unashamed socialist. Jacinda Ardern is also a compassionate leader and unashamed socialist. All over the developed world, compassionate and, in a lot of cases, socialist-leaning leaders have led better pandemic responses than countries led by populist, right-wing, capitalist leaders. Think United States, Brazil, and sadly, the UK. Now, as Jeremy Corbyn never got to be Prime Minister, we'll never know how a Corbyn-led pandemic response would have looked. But whichever side of the political spectrum you come from, any pandemic response led by a leader who's less like Boris Johnson and more like Jacinda Ardern would surely have been favourable. And I think it's clear who Jeremy Corbyn would be more aligned with. Sadly, we're all surrounded by the evidence of how catastrophically bad the Boris Johnson-led response has been. I'd concede that the UK government are doing well with the vaccine procurement and rollout, but there's no evidence to suggest that Jeremy Corbyn couldn't have managed it equally well. In fact, if the timeline I've detailed was our COVID reality, then the vaccine may not have been such a pressing priority. It may have been more of a belt and braces safety measure than part of our ongoing struggle against the pandemic. So the next time someone says to you, "Can you imagine this with Jeremy Corbyn in charge?" you could always reply, "Sadly, I don't have to imagine what it is like with Boris Johnson in charge, because the carnage is plain for all to see." Folks, thanks for watching. DaviePHD.